Couple things from last week. Just want to point out, visiting with some clients. One of them went to a home. They want to do a remodel, and this was a home built in not early 2000s, mid 2000s. 4,800 square foot main floor footprint, not including the garage. So that's almost a 10,000 square foot house. It's like a 9,000 square foot house on the main and down in the basement. And they had a couple complaints about the house. Now, ironically, with this particular house, it was built by two guys that I know who are from my local area, who are both now retired. But it's interesting because it's a lesson in big isn't necessarily better. And be cautious about what you think you want and what you don't know. In this particular case, it was the kitchen and the ceiling height and the overall size of the main floor. There's a comfortable, do you remember ever hearing about the kitchen triangle? So back in the day, it was all the rage where between your cooktop, your refrigerator, and your sink, it should be no more than 27 feet or something like that. There's a certain amount of efficient steps you can get between all these things. And in the 50s, 60s, 70s, everything was about efficiency. It was about functionality, form followed function, that type of thing. And so people built houses, they built kitchens, they built everything based on that guiding principle. However, what it did leave was a lot of aesthetics lacking. So when I first started my career and we started looking at kitchens, kitchen design, that type of stuff, the whole kitchen triangle was still a thing. There's less and less and more designers, and there's less and less people who want it, more and more designers who are like, you know, that's not really a thing anymore, because especially in custom luxury homes, when your kitchen's a certain width, a certain distance, that still functions perfectly fine if you just get the parts and pieces right. Because really what we're talking about with that triangle is certain functional zones within your kitchen that you want to maintain. And so let me show you, there's a few different ways to do a kitchen. You can do the U, right? So you have this and your islands face this way. You can do a galley kitchen where it looks kind of like this and it's more of a pass through. You can do this this L shape right here, which does something like that. And then you can often put in an island, and that's what theirs was. They had the sink here, cooktop here, refrigerator here. And so once you look at the overall distance and how big the kitchen is, and let me make sure I point this one very, very important thing out. If you haven't read an enormous amount of plans in your life, and you haven't, like, if you haven't done that at certain scales, there's almost no way to get an idea or feel for the scale of space until you actually walk through it. It's really interesting, and this is one of the greatest challenges, I guess one of the greatest responsibilities as a residential architect. It's like there's this aesthetic thing you put your trust in me to try to deliver. Then there's this functional part of this whole thing that you put your trust in me to try to deliver. And the balance between those two things is why you pay me a pretty decent amount of money in order to execute that. Because both those things in harmony with each other are really, really hard to achieve. And this home was the perfect example of it. And so this particular relationship up here, with a kitchen like that, let's lay it out just a little bit bigger. With a cooktop here, refrigerator down here, windows here, sink here. Island, which was, I don't know, probably from here to here was probably, I don't know, 17 feet or something. It was huge. It was huge. 17 feet is huge. Just for some scale and some context, if I've got countertop here, to do this, take something here, move it here, 3 feet to 3'6", boom, ba-doom. Once I hit 4 feet, it's one step. Once I go over 4'6" to 4'8", we're pushing 2 steps. Once I hit 5 feet in the distance between those two countertops, it's definitely 2 steps. And so when you're looking at kitchen design, there is a matter of how efficient do you want it, and then how functional is it, and then what's it for? What's the purpose of the kitchen? Is it to host grand parties? Because a kitchen for parties is very different than a kitchen for just you or you and your spouse or something like that. So by the time you put another island in here with another sink in plan, that looks like a pretty awesome kitchen. It's like, wow, that's so big and huge, and that's exactly what I wanted. And so we're gonna put some chairs down here, little round kitchen. And so what the intention was this right here becomes the working triangle. However, this ends up being so far away from each other. And then all of your people are over here. Then to get from here, if you're having a conversation, you're standing in this work zone, this is a full room away, practically. You're yelling at the people in order to have a conversation. It doesn't work out that well. And so what we're going to go do is try to salvage this kitchen. However, when you have a space this big, I don't know how many, I mean, that's the design challenge. How do you save this kitchen and still have it relate to all the different parts and pieces around it? Because there is a living room here, which isn't super functional. There's a dining room here. There's a hallway that goes off this way, a hallway that comes in this way. And so we have all these weird relationships of all these different rooms that actually don't align or look at each other properly. And so the whole thing's a jumbled mess. So the story is, when they were designing this home, one of the couple, like, this kitchen's too big. The other of the couple was like, no, it's not. There's such a thing as a pendulum swing, right? And I've seen this over and over and over again, where if you grew up in a home, or you spent the majority of your time in a home that had like 8-foot ceilings or 7'6" ceilings, or you had one of those basements which was not really the split level, but the rambler with a basement, and then you finish the basement, and that basement was never really meant to be finished, and you have the tiny little slit windows at the top. You know what I'm talking about. And then that ceiling ends up being about 7 feet tall. Everyone hates those. Why? Because they're so cramped, there's no light. And so really what it's a function of is the lack of light that feels like this cave. And every single woman I talk to hates those spaces. They like intimate, cute spaces, but there's no way to make a basement intimate or cute. And it's very difficult to make those 8-foot ceilings in those old ramblers from the 50s, 60s really cute also. There's some strategies we can do to improve them, but most people just want to, let's take that roof off and raise the ceiling because of the lack of light and just how cramped it feels. And so what happens is, you're over here in one extreme and you're like, I want vaulted ceilings. And so what happened is so many of the reality of the boomer generation that grew up in ceiling heights like this, everyone wanted a vault, right? That was the sign of status, wealth, and just happiness, was I have a vaulted ceiling. And so I'm this tall in my vaulted ceiling, whereas that's too short. So this is interesting because this is one pendulum swing. It's like, be careful when you're doing this because how cavernous it might feel. One of the interesting things with this particular house with the kitchen dilemma was that they still had a flat ceiling. They didn't have a lot of vaults. There were a couple vaults here and there, but not a lot. But the flat ceiling was at 12 feet. 12 feet. 8 feet short. Oh, so 10 feet's good, right? And so then the logic is, well, then 12 feet must be better. Well, when you put the entire house at 12 feet, there's no relief, there's no intimacy, there's no push, pull, there's no, it feels cavernous. The whole thing just feels cavernous. And so one of the other goals that we have for this remodel that we're going to look at is where and how to lower the ceilings in order to create some more intimate spaces and bring the light down closer to the individual. And so if we locate the windows in the right place and get the ceilings, just the overall scale of the rooms to the right scale, then it feels really nice. You've been into houses that feel timeless. Why? What is it about them? There's a certain level of character. The spaces actually feel like they were properly designed for in the end, the function or the purpose of the ends of that particular room. And when those things are all in really good harmony, everything just feels really right. Typically in today's custom homes, like a baseline high-end luxury custom home, just for anyone if you're wondering, it takes about 2,500 square feet on the main level in order to get all of your basics, including a master bedroom, primary bedroom on the main, and an office and a laundry room, and then the kitchen, dining, hallway, stairways, et cetera, et cetera. That's kind of your baseline. So if you put a basement in there or put a second floor, what you're looking at is a 5,000 to 6,000 square foot house, typically in the Western U.S. Or anywhere where you have a basement, and so that's just typical. And then kitchen sizes is interesting because the width of them, oftentimes what we'll do in order to bring light in, what we want is we want windows on both sides, and so that ends up being galley kitchen-ish, unless it's not, and the distance between the wall and the wall and every let me redraw this. I'm completely doing this wrong. So what we want first we have to determine how big's our cooktop. It's a 36, 48. And then oftentimes, this is a very typical design these days, the distance between cooktop and island, it's going to be about 4'4", ideally. Those walkways, 4 foot to 4'4". You'll have windows, and then you can have flanking refrigerator, freezer, or even over here, depending on how wide it is, and then a sink on one of these two areas. And so the distance you need in order to pull off a kitchen like this, to have like an 8-foot island or a 6-foot, an 8-foot island is really nice. 10 foot is super nice. 12 foot is like, oh my goodness, that's big. Is 20 to 24 feet in width, and that's pretty typical. And then hallways can go back into pantries and other things, but this is a very typical kitchen design, and trying to integrate that into the overall design can be a little challenging. But this is a proven functional kitchen that actually works and people don't complain about. Why? Because what we're doing is we're essentially trying to set up zones. We're not trying to set up the whole cooking triangle. And so if there's a cleanup zone that relates to the pantry, or if this becomes a cooking zone right here with access, and if this is a buffet or a buffet zone, or and that type of thing. And so really what we're looking at is zoning the kitchen of this size and this scale in a way that maintains the functionality of that working triangle, but we don't have to have it. And the reality is the people who have the flanking refrigerators on either side, most of them that I've talked to after having lived in them for a few years, they don't mind it. It's like, you know what, it's really not that far away. And if the kitchen ends up being just a beautiful experience overall anyway, because both the cabinetry and the design, the colors, the materials, the textures, and all that type of stuff, it's just a pleasure to walk that distance. And so, anyway, be careful about what you don't know and what you've experienced in your life so far, because it could come to really bite you in the butt. And what we want to do with all of the homes that we make is we don't want to feel like we have to remodel them or completely dismantle them and do something different after literally 20 years, 10 or 20 years. That's just absolutely ridiculous. I get it if you need to put on additions and more additions and more additions over time, but this whole business of building some crazy big overscaled thing and then trying to figure out how to make it actually functional. It's like, yeah, you know what? Let's be a little bit more temperate in how we approach these things. Anyway, that's my own personal advice. So that is a little bit of info for you this morning, and